What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again talking college football. And today is the day we break down Utah ahead of the 2025 season. If you like this content, please consider a like, subscribing to the channel. Both of those things help us a ton as we try to grow. You'd be shocked what even a like does for a small channel like this. So if you've done those things, thank you. And we're recording this on June 10th. If I miss anything on Utah, or you just have any feedback, recommendations, or want to see a team, let me know. Let's take a look at Utah and what happened last year before we spin this forward. Here are the efficiency metrics from 2024. Should come as no surprise. This offense really sputtered, and in large part because Cam Rising gets hurt again. Your four-star freshman Isaac Wilson is a little bit in over his head. Receiving room definitely didn't come together. Players like Dorian Singer never quite lived up to expectations. Keefe can't quite get back from the injury. And your offensive line is your strength. Even the run game, what we saw out of the running back specifically left a lot to be desired. It was a lot of Micah Bernard going out there, getting exactly what's blocked and not much more, which kind of makes a little bit of sense. He was a smallish back, a pass catching back. At least that was what he began as, eventually developing into a little bit more. But the offense struggled. Defense, this was the second straight season. They didn't quite live up to expectations. They were 62nd in 2023. They come in 50th in 24. Biggest problem was the pass rush. The coverage unit was actually pretty good, and run defense was middling. The defensive lines we've come to know and love with Utah just weren't living up to expectations. Now, they were still good and above average unit, but when this team was competing for the Pac-12 and competing now for the Big 12, we just came to expect a little bit more from this unit, which brings us kind of to a year of transition for Kyle Whittingham, who enters year 21. Overall, he's 167 and 86. Last year was his first losing season since 2013. They finished 5-7, and that was after a 4-0 start, beating Southern Utah, Baylor, Utah State, and Oklahoma State. Some of those a little closer than you'd like, especially Oklahoma State. You only win that game by 3 points. Their other win was against UCF to close the season out. But it wasn't all bad. I mean, they were very close to a bowl. They had a lot of single-digit losses. They lost to Arizona State by 8 points. TCU by 6, Houston by 3, BYU by 1, Iowa State by 3. You flip one of those games, you're in a bowl, and things probably aren't quite as bad. However, I think they knew midseason this wasn't going the way they wanted, even with the Rising injury. Andy Ludwig steps down. You have an interim OC. Now you go out and you hire Jason Beck, so things are looking a lot different. He was the New Mexico offensive coordinator last year, Syracuse before that. But he runs an RPO, run-heavy spread style scheme. He does bring in a lot of continuity. His QB, Devin Dampier, comes with him. So it's going to be sort of a new-look Utah offense, even though it still will remain kind of what we know and love with the ground and pound, run-heavy, win-in-the-trenches approach. Defense should be the same. Morgan Scaley's back again. He's been there since 2016. Again, this defense has taken a slight step back over the last couple of years. They kind of just need this to get back to form. But can they do that? Talent acquisition is a big part. Let's take a look at that before we get into the roster. Utah did have the #1 recruiting class in the Big 12 in 2023. Now, they were in the Pac-12 that year, just took their ranking and overlaid it against the current Big 12 teams. It was a top 20 class. The problem is they only retained 38% of it, and that class brought in 8 4-stars. Only 3 of them are still on the roster, which is a problem with your talent acquisition, or these guys just not getting on the field quickly enough. I mean, some of them, John Randall's down at an FCS program. Mikey Matthews is on his 3rd school. Deshaun Stanley now transfers out. You have to develop these players a little bit better, which generally isn't a problem for Utah. So I'm not sure what happened with this 2023 class. But what you can say is they've not been able to replicate it 2 classes after that at 43rd and 59th. Even last year's class at 57% retention, we're seeing Utah embrace the transfer portal at record levels. And they're still only 37th this year. The year prior, 2024, they were 33rd. And 23, they were 44th. So this is a team falling a little bit behind the 8 ball in recruiting. You're seeing teams like Baylor and TCU, even some other programs really Texas Tech spend a lot of money, whether it's in the portal or recruiting. And Utah just hasn't quite lived up to that level of play, which is shown on the field. But let's look at the roster we have for this year. Here's our data usage tool. If you'd like this, it is available in the Discord. Basically what we have, projecting the 2 deep roster, transfers are in yellow. Then we have their year in school next to that, snaps they played the last 2 seasons, recruiting ranking in terms of what star they were coming out, and then a value score, which looks first at your recruitment, then it factors in on-field play. The more snaps you play, the more production you have, the less it looks at that recruiting ranking. So kicking things off, we have the quarterback position where they lose longtime starter Cam Rising. He elects to retire, even though probably could have gotten another year of eligibility. He's been hurt so much, I get it. They bring in 3 transfers. Devin Dampier from New Mexico. Nate Johnson comes back after his sabbatical with Vanderbilt. Brendan Zerbrug is coming in from Oklahoma as well. But by all accounts, this is Dampier's job. He comes in with the continuity. He was on that New Mexico team with their OC. He's a smaller guy, 5'10", 198. As a passer, 58% completion percentage, 2,768 yards last year. That was 7.1 yards per attempt. 12 touchdowns, 12 picks, 20 big-time throws, and he ran kind of bad on the turnover-worthy plays. He only had 10 of them, but he had 12 interceptions, which is one of the worst marks in the country. Not worse as in he was really bad, worse as in his receivers have to stop volleyball setting these passes on target to defenders. Generally, if someone has 10 turnover-worthy plays, you're expecting about 5 interceptions. He had 10 turnover-worthy plays and 12 interceptions. 2 of them are just unaccounted for interceptions that should be blamed on someone else. I mean, this could have been an even better season for Dampier. And that doesn't even factor in what he did on the ground. 1,166 yards at 7.5 yards per carry, 19 touchdowns. He only took 4 sacks all season. That was a 4.1 pressure to sack ratio. That is one of the best marks in the entire country. Was it New Mexico? Now you need to bring this up to the Big 12, which is a big step in competition. But man, he's not taking sacks, which was a huge part of his game and why New Mexico was even in position to win some of the games they did win. They were a shootout team. That defense was atrocious. Behind him, they sort of strategically add some players. Johnson has been with the team already. He's 6'1", 196. Not a great passer, only a 54% completion percentage, but he does have 400 career rushing yards. That's 5.3 yards per carry. I think if you want to continue running the same offense in the event of a Dampier injury, this is important. Zerbrug, I think, is just more of a depth piece. I don't know why he really went to Oklahoma. He's a 3-star on the 56th QB in that cycle. I remember when he was coming out and he was talking about Oklahoma, it almost seemed like a surprise he got an offer for them. So at best, I think he's the QB3, and he might be the QB4 because they still have Isaac Wilson, the 2024 4-star, who honestly was just pressed into action way too soon considering he was a freshman. I don't know what to tell you. Like, Brandon Rose was never able to play for this team. They just didn't have anyone on the roster that really could play behind him, so I get why they did it, but still. 56.5% completion, 1,510 yards, that's 6.7 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, only 7 big-time throws, 17 turnover-worthy plays. Took 19 sacks. That was a 20% pressure to sack ratio. Held on the ball too long. That's just what happens when you're a freshman playing in the Big 12. So it's excusable, but he now needs to develop, and hopefully he didn't develop scars moving forward. I know there was some potential transfer stuff about him, but he elects to stay. Just don't see how he's any higher than 3rd string on the depth chart in the current edition of this offense. But you never know. He could be as high as 2nd. Some of this is going to play out throughout the summer. To the running back position, they lose Micah Bernard. They lose most of their depth pieces. They basically all transfer out. They bring in 4 transfers: Wayshawn Parker from Washington State, Nakari Rogers, New Mexico, the familiarity in the offense, Devin Green, UNLV, and Bryce Duke from Old Dominion. Wayshawn Parker is expected to lead this backfield. He's 6 feet, 199, rushed for 735 yards. That's 5.4 yards per carry. As a freshman with Washington State, good efficiency, forced 35 missed tackles, caught 11 passes. He should lead what is probably a committee. Nakari Rogers is 5'11", 208. He rushed for 382 yards last year. That's 5.2 yards per carry. He was originally a Campbell transfer, but really efficient on his opportunities, just didn't get a ton of them. And then from there, Green, he only carried 29 times. He was a freshman with UNLV, so probably a back for the future. Bryce Duke looks like more of a depth piece. He was originally a Virginia Tech transfer, but he actually had 6.2 yards per carry on a very small role with Old Dominion last year, caught 9 passes. It's a pretty unproven group behind Wayshawn Parker, but enough pieces in place where you should feel decent about the room moving forward. And that's a pretty good unit overall, all things considered. Getting the Wayshawn Parker addition was big for this team. At receiver, they lose most of their players. They lost their top 4 wide receivers specifically. That included Dorian Singer, who was, I guess, their best player. They add a lot of transfers, 6 of them. Creed Whittemore from Mississippi State, Tobias Merriweather from Cal, Ryan Davis from New Mexico, another familiar face, Larry Simmons from Southern Miss, Otto Tia from Utah State, and Justin Stevenson from Wyoming. Whittemore is 5'11", 185. He's a former 4-star who just never quite got on the field as much as people thought with Mississippi State. Big slot receiver, only 1.04 yards per route, and he only has 5 receptions. So this is someone with at least a good recruiting pedigree. Just kind of scary that he hasn't done anything with it, especially on a team as bad as Mississippi State. Tobias Merriweather was another former 4-star. He originally was with Notre Dame, transferred to Cal. He got hurt last year before the season started, and then he came back late in the year. Had 26 catches for 450 yards over his 3-year career, but he's going to be your big-bodied perimeter receiver, 6'5", 195. 1.22 yards per route is not fantastic either. So you're kind of dealing with a pair of failed 4-stars. Can we rehabilitate these guys and get something out of them? We'll see. It kind of reminds me, like the Mikey Matthews situation or a little bit of Dorian Singer. We have a high recruit that hasn't exactly panned out. Aside from that, we mentioned Ryan Davis comes over with familiarity, 5'11", 167. He was originally with UAB, but last year he caught 54 balls for 747 yards, perimeter receiver for the most part. Just needs to make that jump in competition. Larry Simmons was originally with Ole Miss before he had to transfer down to Southern Miss. He's 6'1", 190, caught 27 passes for 421 yards last year, but couldn't get on the field with Ole Miss. So again, had to transfer down. Now he's trying to come back up to play at a higher level. We'll see what he can do. Otto Tia, he's been with Utah State for 4 years. He only had 6 catches through his first 3. Then he caught 44 receptions for 434 yards last year. He's 6'4", 220. Just like a pretty big concern that he had to sit on the bench for 3 years in the Mountain West. And then when he played, he still only averaged 1.07 yards per route. It's a little bit concerning. And finally, Justin Stevenson from Wyoming. He's entering his 3rd season with 17 catches for 204 yards under his belt, 6'1", 192. That was a horrific Wyoming passing attack last year. So I think there's maybe a little bit of hope for him, but still, it's a big level of competition, at least that jump. As far as the incumbents, Dadrin Zipper is back. Former JUCO transfer Luca Caldarella is back. Neither of them particularly efficient, but we already talked about that receiving room last year and just the pass game as a whole. Very hard to succeed, but can't imagine either of these guys is really in your top 3 receivers with all the transfers coming in, but you never know. The only other player to mention is J.J. Buchanan, who's a true freshman, one of the best athletes on the team. You'll see some fun videos of him on social media doing like 37-inch standing vertical jumps and whatnot. Maybe he gets on the field. I would be a little bit surprised. They don't like playing their young players very much, and he's not been there very long, so we will see. Overall, if you made me pick a top 3 receivers on this team, I would say Whittemore, Tobias Merriweather, and Ryan Davis are your most likely, with Larry Simmons being potentially that wide receiver 3 or 4. The unit wasn't very good last year. I'm not sure it's going to be fantastic this year, but it can't really be any worse. Tight end, they lose 5 of their top 6 tight ends. This is a big concern. Keithy being one of them. And, there's a lot of players that are gone from this unit. They had some unfortunate spring departures as well, which definitely don't help. They lose Landon King in the spring portal window. I guess you could say Dallin Bentley must have been pretty good, and he was the team's leading tight end in terms of snaps at 376. He's 6'4", 258, only caught 2 passes, and he was mainly a blocker. An average blocker at that, so this is not an obstacle that really should prevent tight ends from playing a lot. They also have Hunter Andrews. I think Utah is going to use less 12 personnel under the new system, but Hunter Andrews is back, and he must have looked good in the spring. He's only a redshirt freshman with 3 snaps to his name, but you're running off Landon King, so maybe it's him or Drew Clemens, the true freshman, playing really well. This is a thin position. They're carrying far fewer tight ends than they have in the past, which is another indication that they're probably running more spread stuff, more 3 wide, and running out of that. But still, Tight end, a little bit of a weakness considering the players they lost. Offensive line is the opposite of a weakness. This was the best unit on their team. It was a borderline top 20 unit last year, and they're returning everybody. We won't spend a ton of time on this unit just because I think the analysis is pretty clear. This was an awesome O-line with everyone back. Left tackle, former four-star Caleb Lomu's back. I mean, he allowed 17 pressures, only 2 sacks, very good run blocking metrics. And that was as a young player. I mean, this guy is still only a redshirt sophomore. There's potential for him to grow further. Left guard, Tanoa Togai is back. He played 649 snaps last year. Very, very good run blocker. Still only 16 pressures, 2 sacks for him as well. He has over 1,000 snaps of experience, most of that coming in the last 2 seasons. Left guard is locked down. Center Jared Crump, he's back after 772 snaps last year. Crump has nearly 2,000 snaps to his name. He only allowed 12 QB pressures, amazing run blocking metrics. He's going to man your center. Michael Mokofisi is back at right guard. He played 405 snaps last year, suffered an injury in week 8. He started the better part of the last 3 years, over 2,000 snaps to his name. Only 10 pressures allowed for him. Good run blocker. He should be your right guard. And finally, right tackle, former 4-star Spencer Fano. He kind of headlines the offensive line. 2 years of starting experience, amazing run blocker. Only allowed 14 pressures and 1 sack in the pass game. And honestly, their depth is pretty good as well. You bring in a couple transfers. You have a 4-star freshman in Isaiah Garcia, another freshman transfer in Kalolo Ta'aga from USC. It's not only just that this team has this 5 starters all back. Your depth is pretty good too. You wouldn't want an injury, but I think it's in a pretty good place. This is probably the best offensive line in the entire Big 12, which is going to benefit Dampier. It's going to hopefully benefit Wayshawn Parker in this run game and take some pressure off those guys in year 1. Getting to the defense, again, this was a defense that was around the top 40, but it was not quite what they wanted it to be. On the edge, you lose Van Fillinger and Connor O'Toole, but you do return Logan Fano, who led the team with 33 pressures. He's 250 pounds, good run defender. He's an excellent place to start, should man one of those edge positions. The second most experienced edge is Paul Fitzgerald. A big problem with Utah the last 2 seasons really is they've taken a lot of transfers that have failed. And Paul Fitzgerald is one of those. He was awesome with Utah State, but then he could only get on the field for 87 snaps, looked pretty bad when he was out there. So I don't think you're really going to see him man that second edge position. He's a candidate, but he would need some development. They did add a couple transfers in Lance Holtzclaw from Washington and Jackson Jones from Oregon. I think these two are more likely to battle for that second edge position. Holtzclaw is a former 3-star. He has 202 snaps in 3 years. But Jones in particular, he's a redshirt freshman 4-star. That's a player you can develop and put on the field immediately as long as that development is actually there. From there, the group is not the deepest, but that's 4 right up top that I think you could feel decent about. And then inside, your main losses are Junior Tafuna and Keanu Tanuvasa, who they lose to BYU, but they do return Dallas Vakalahi. I always have to say that slow, excuse me, but Vakalahi played 249 snaps as a freshman, 305 pounds, good run defender, also had 10 pressures. As a freshman playing nearly 250 snaps and already over 300 pounds, those are good numbers. They also return Aliki Vamahi, who had 133 snaps last year. That was because of injury. He's 305 pounds and also has over 1,000 snaps in his career. He was really good as a run defender on that tiny sample last year, which makes sense. Those two stand out as 2 players you can use in tandem. And then you have a couple sophomores that have played a little bit. John Henry Daly and Jonah Leah are back. Henry Daly, he's a BYU transfer, had 7 pressures on 52 snaps. Very good rate stats. Will be asked to play more. And they also actually flipped a 3-star recruit from LSU in Dylan Battle. So I think this run defense overall is going to be around the same, probably a little better. I think you're hoping this unit could push for their ceiling maybe as a top 20 unit. But I don't think they're falling much further than 40th or 50th just on the defensive line as a whole. It should be a pretty good group. Linebacker, they're returning a lot of production. Part of the reason some of their run defense metrics especially fell, they lost some linebackers to injury last year. Levani Damuni barely played. I mean, the only guy they lose this year is Karen Reed, so that's solid. Lander Barton does return, and he played a lot last year, 763 snaps. He led the team with 72 tackles. Also a good blitzer, 20 pressures, QB pressures. In coverage, 86% completion percentage, but he did keep everything in front of him. 262 scoreless yards, 2 picks, 2 PBUs. Barton is now in his third year starting with Utah. I mean, he's a very good player, over 1,500 snaps to his name. He's going to man one of those positions. And then from there, you hope Demooney can just come back and play basically what we saw in 2023 before the injury. In that season, he had 87 tackles, which led the team. He also had some starting experience with Stanford before he came to Utah. He has over 1,900 snaps in his career. Back in 23, 79% completion for 234 scoreless yards in his coverage. That's awesome production. And then they also get back Jonathan Hall, who was forced to play 337 snaps, 38 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, so a good blitzer for him as well. Decent in coverage, allowed 2 touchdowns, but only 96 yards. I think his season could have been even better if he didn't miss 10 missed tackles as well. So that's a very good benefit. Then you have Trey Reynolds. He's a depth piece. They had a 4-star freshman in Cyrus Polu, a decent 3-star in Christian Thatcher. Linebacker should be a lot better, just assuming health. Defensive back, you lose 3 DBs. You lose Cam Calhoun to transfer, which is an issue. But you do have a lot of players back that I think you can be optimistic in. Elijah Davis is back after 421 snaps, probably going to play the boundary. 61% completion for 323 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks, 2 PBUs. Very good as a run defender, so that's a good place. Smith Snowden is one of those rare 4-stars they were able to keep on the roster. 644 snaps, 42% completion percentage, couple big plays, 402 yards, 3 scores, but he had 2 interceptions and 6 PBUs, also good in run defense. He was actually 4th on the team in tackles, 48 of them. Those are 2 good corners. The final corner spot is probably going to come down to a transfer, and they had a lot of them. They have Don Saunders from Texas A&M. They have Blake Cotton from UC Davis. They have Jalen Monson from Furman, and they also have J.C. Hart on the roster. Those are all from Auburn. Those are all players that could potentially take over that last starting role. Starting with Saunders, he comes from Texas A&M, but he couldn't really play there. He was originally with Cal Poly before he tried to go to the SEC. They love their big corners. He's 6'3", and he was very efficient in the FCS, just flew a little too close to the sun with the SEC play. So hopefully they can get him on the field. Clearly they have a type. Cotton is also 6'3". He was very good in the FCS, now just a big jump in competition. Mosan was pretty decent. He only played in 5 games before he got hurt, so it's really hard to say. I think he's more of a depth piece. And then Hart from Auburn, he's only played 48 snaps. Last year, he's 63 snaps throughout his 2-year career. Hard to say what you get out of Hart as well. I think aside from Mosan, you're looking at a good competition for that final corner spot, and at least you're at a deep position here now. At safety, no real concerns here. Tao Johnson is back. He's one of the best defenders on the team. 70 tackles last year. That was second. Coverage was good. 56% completion, 140 scoreless yards, 1 pick, 5 PBUs. Now entering his 3rd year starting. He's going to lock one of your safety positions up. The other safety position is probably either Rabbit Evans or Nate Ritchie. Maybe one of them kicks in the slot. Evans played 256 snaps, 34 tackles, very good run defense numbers. Allowed 10 catches for 80 scoreless yards. That's pretty solid. Ritchie's a former 4-star, 209 snaps last year. He is 771 through his 3-year career. The only real problem with his efficiency is he missed 8 tackles. You can clean that up. I mean, you could play somewhere else. Safety's not quite as deep because you lose players like Jelani Davis transferred in the spring window. So walk-ons like Jackson Beanie are in. You're too deep, or you're looking at a freshman, but at least you have 3 strong contributors up top. In the kicking game, Dylan Curtis is going to take over kicking duties. He's a freshman, no experience, but leg strength is supposed to be positive to his game. Usually with inexperienced kickers, I'm like, you got to show me before I really say anything one way or another on this. But ultimately, this Utah roster is better than last year's. This Utah team would beat last year's Utah team. And I think there's a chance they are back to form as they clearly desire to be. What they did in the transfer portal and what they retained on their roster speaks a lot more to me than what they lost in the recruitments the last couple of years. But let's take a look at the schedule. That is always going to be the most important factor determining wins and losses with Utah and every other team. They have a weird road trip week 1 to UCLA. Definitely not an easy game. Cal Poly should be a win. And then Wyoming's not a good team, but it's a weird road trip to Laramie. So I mean, like this is a weird non-con schedule. I think they should be 3-0. We'll see with UCLA. It's going to be a close game, but winnable non-con. In conference, it is not the easiest. They have to play Texas Tech, Arizona State, Kansas State, and Baylor. Among the other teams with very good odds, the only one you dodge is TCU. Still, you face a fair number of rebuilding teams: West Virginia, BYU, Colorado, Cincinnati, and Kansas. With that said, a few of these are in tricky road spots. You have to play away at West Virginia in week 5. Then you have to play away at BYU. Now, that's not as bad as some other teams that have to travel to BYU, but still, 2 weird road trips for a team that gets a lot of their tougher games at home. But still, this is not an easy schedule. It's among the harder ones in the Big 12. With that said, I think this team is a candidate to eclipse their win total and looking at a dark horse berth in the college football playoff via a Big 12 championship. What they're going to need is that QB room to come together. And the one scare that I really have is if they're down, what does this look like? We've said this with a lot of Big 12 teams and Utah especially. They're built to run the ball with that offensive line. If the opening team, say you're playing Texas Tech, gets the opening kickoff, scores immediately, you have a mistake, and then suddenly you're down like 10 or 14 points, how does your offense function? That's the main question I have with this team, but they're well built. This is one of the better teams in the conference. Let me know what you think, who you want to hear about next. We'll continue to Big 12 before we finish up the other conferences. Until then, good luck, everyone. We will see you again next time.